Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very happy to be talking to Coach Stephen today. We're going to be doing the, what do you call it? Carnivore telethon? Is that what you're calling it?
Carnithon. Yeah, Carnithon, like a marathon.
Carni-thon. Yes,
Yeah.
love it. It's on July 9th. Join us. Is it free?
Oh, it's absolutely free. It starts at 8 a.m. on Sunday, the 9th of July. That's 8 a.m. in UK time. And we're just running 24 hours, myself and my co-host, Richard Smith, the Keto Pro. Yeah, we're both based in the UK, but we've got tons of really fantastic guests coming in. We were just speaking before he started recording. Dr. Anthony Chafee's doing the first 3 hours, helping us kick off into the 24. Dr. Kiltz, Dr. Lisa, yourself, of course, obviously, Dr. Avadia, just so many. I can't even remember. Dr. Salt. So it's going to be great. Sean Baker, Dr. Kevin Stock. Yeah, loads.
Wow. I'm going to be on July 9th on 11 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be my time, just so if people want to know. 11
and you're still the show, won't you? You'll come in and you're still the show.
Always. We're joking. I'm excited for it. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me on. So, Coach Stephen, I know everybody knows who you are, but just in case we have new people following a carnivore diet and they don't know who Coach Stephen is, can you share a little bit about your background and also how you came to recommend a lifestyle that is so at odds with the traditional recommendations?
Aha. Well, yes, I can do that. Long story, I suppose. I'll try and make it as brief as possible. But I started as a high carb semi-professional soccer player. I also won a singles title in tennis, and I did a bodybuilding tournament in my 20s. And I absolutely believed in the high carb diet. I absolutely thought fat was the worst thing you could possibly eat. I can remember looking at Muscle and Fitness magazine when I was doing my bodybuilding show and seeing that some of the bodybuilders were experimenting with high fat. And I can remember thinking, I'm not even reading that. Well, what's the point? I was that brainwashed, as I now call it. I was brainwashed at the time. I didn't realize, and I just believed everything. The food pyramid, which is obviously the worst pyramid scheme in the world now, I realized. I just believed it. And as I got older, I qualified as a personal trainer, and then I did advanced personal training. I was training an Olympic javelin thrower. I was really so seriously into it, but also studying at the same time. And the more I got into the advanced personal training, I wanted to add more qualifications, to my portfolio. So I started to study obesity and diabetes. And I'm going to fast forward now to my 40s. And it was when I started really getting deep into the obesity side of things and the diabetic side of things in particular, I realized that a lot of medications are all based on carbohydrate intake. And I can, tell you now, I was in classroom and I was putting my hand up and saying, well, why don't we just reduce carbs? That seems to make more sense. And I was laughed out of the classroom, basically. But my own personal journey was I should have been the fittest person in the world because I followed the guidelines. I didn't even smoke. I had no alcohol in my system. I was a personal trainer. I was doing everything right. Oatmeal, skim milk. I was avoiding red meat. I was avoiding fat. And I was 40, doing all the activity, and I was getting plumper. I was pre-diabetic, which incidentally is the biggest PR scam, but we'll get into that being a fake thing anyway. I qualified as a phlebotomist at that point, and I had lower left quadrant pain. I had to have a colonoscopy. Both of my parents died when I was very young. My mum and my dad both sort of avoided red meat, and they were really into all the cereals and all that sort of stuff. My mum was basically eating bran and fiber, and she died of colon cancer quite young. So I got into my 40s, and I can remember the colonoscopy. I can remember sitting in the ward and completely believing that I was doing all the right things and it was just genetics. That was the hand I was given. My dad had died of cancer. My mum had died of colon cancer. This was it. It was preordained, written in the stars that this was it. But as I studied and studied, there was still this niggling doubt that I was actually possibly eating too many carbohydrates. And then when I got to age 50, which was 9 years ago, I'm 59, I discovered, please don't laugh, Eric Berg. And he seemed to make a lot of sense. Actually, I love him. I don't care what people say about him. I
I
think
think
he
you've
does.
got a lot of helpful information. I make sure my
Yes.
students, a lot of times, I'll pull up a video of his. I mean, he's got topics on so many things. Anything that's functional medicine oriented is a step in the right direction. You know, it's okay if we
Yes.
disagree on the vegetable portion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of putting it. It was a step in the right direction. It was certainly the right person for me at the time. So I decided, yeah, I'm gonna reduce my carbohydrates and see what happens there. So I went low carb, and lo and behold, the tubbiness that was blighting my life, even though I was eating less and moving more and low fat and all that rubbish, all of a sudden low carb, and it just dropped off. But my health improved. I used to have a big rash here, which looked like somebody got a strawberry and smashed it against my head. I had athlete's foot, lower left quadrant pain. I had a coronary artery calcium score of 639. So it was now time to try low carb. Low carb did work, and then some names you might not have heard in this community started to enter into my world. Ken Berry is a small influencer on YouTube.
Who?
Yeah. We'll look him up later.
I'm pulling a Mariah Carey right now. I don't know her.
He really grabbed my attention. I'm actually quite embarrassed to say this, but I say it anyway. I'd never heard of Sean Baker, never heard of Joe Rogan, never heard of Jordan Peterson, Michaela Peterson at this point, but I did hear of Ken Berry, very convinced about this. So I tried keto. And
so that was 9 years ago. He didn't start has he had a YouTube channel for that long?
No, that's right. I did low carb for about 3-4 years.
That was around the time he started.
And I started, well, he was a small influencer then, and he was still saying, eat your greens. Come on, you eat your greens and all this sort of stuff. And I think I sort of did a parallel journey with him, because I went keto, and then strangely enough, when he started being carnivore, and I wasn't following him, it just seemed more sense. So I got to age 55, and by this time I had discovered Sean Baker, and I had discovered Joe Rogan and the carnivore diet, and obviously Paul Saladino when he was carnivore and making lots of sense. You know, it was interesting. And so I went from low carb, keto, and then at age 55 became an online carnivore coach, fasting coach as well, because I like to qualify in everything. You know, I like to study everything. So that was 4 years ago. Became carnivore, and my bloods are brilliant, absolutely excellent. I still haven't gone back to have a CAC score, because at the moment, after the restrictions, there's still a big waiting list. So I'm not going to get in front of other patients that need these services because they're ill. I'm not going to do a biohack and jump the queue, right? Because there's a 2-tier system here. I don't care what the politicians say. If you've got money, you can get anything. If you use the NHS, then you're going to be on an 18-month waiting list. And I'm not going to jump the queue, because it's the same facilities. So if I pay, I get onto that machine before somebody who's waiting. A terrible system. So anyway.
So technically speaking, you can get free consults and care, but you can also have the option to pay, like it's, you know, legal. It's not like under.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, private healthcare is a big thing here for people that can afford it. So I mean, I also run a rehab clinic for back pain. I did a lower back specialism years ago when I was doing the personal training. And if someone wants an MRI and you're going to pay for it, you'll get that done within a couple of days, whereas you might have to wait 8-9 weeks with the NHS. It is a 2-tier system. I'm not saying that's good, by the way. I'm not saying endorsing that in any way, but that's a fact of life. If you've got the money, you will get quicker service. So anyway, I don't want to do the coronary artery calcium scan.
I'm sorry, I do want to hear that, but before I forget, do you think that it is a lot cheaper than the United States? Do you have any knowledge on that comparatively, in terms of how much you would pay for any kind of care or services, medical services in the UK versus the United States?
Yeah, things like the DEXA scan, the MRI, you'll get in the States about 1/3 of the price.
It's cheaper here?
Yeah, but some, I
was not expecting that. Okay.
No, I know you weren't.
It to be the opposite. Okay. It's more expensive.
But some of the things that we get free at the point of use, by the way, which is the posh way of saying we're paying for it by our taxes or national insurance contributions, but it's free at the point. So if we have an accident, you'll go into accident, emergencies, and you won't pay anything. There's been no insurance. So, it's not knocking the National Health Service. It's just saying that there's a two-tier way of doing this. So
yeah, here you get into an accident and then you file bankruptcy. That's the difference.
I mean, we have, there's good and bad about the National Health Service. And
yeah,
I think, you can't knock them because they're understaffed and the nurses are underpaid.
Yeah.
But sadly, it's still like in America, as in, the movers and shakers at the top are not looking at the science. It's very difficult to recommend a low carb diet to someone with type 2 diabetes, for instance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's still very like America. It's still about the eat well plate, which is like the food pyramid, but drawn on a plate. So. Yes, but the point being, I'm not going to get a coronary artery calcium scan until the waiting list has gone down. So, so here I am 4 years later. Carnivore has resolved everything. Small sort of niggly things like athlete's foot, which I had been plagued with for 35 years. My blood glucose is great. Ketones look good. Vision's good. I don't burn in the sun. I don't need sunscreen. I never wear sunglasses now, where I was always in sunglasses. My energy's great. My strength's up. My body fat percentage is better. I like the food. I don't have cravings. I have food freedom. I don't think about food like I used to. So it ticked all the boxes. And I've been very lucky. I love your work ethic. The way you do stuff, I really, really appreciate your presence in the space. I wasn't overly confident to talk like this until I had a few clients behind me. Once I got past 500 clients, I was like, this is brilliant. This works for virtually everybody. Absolutely. All, lower blood pressure, coming off metformin, losing weight, anxiety going, skin improving, gut issues improving. And the fallout is really small. The people that can't do it, it tends to be social situations rather than the diet itself. It's very rare that anyone says to me, I'm giving this up because I don't like ribeyes. That doesn't happen. But I miss doing X with my girlfriend, going out and having pizza and, a couple of beers and all this sort of stuff. That tends to be the thing that some people find a problem. So, yeah, I just think it's an amazing way of eating. The community is wonderful, very supportive, and you're keeping away from so many things that you just don't want to be involved in, like glyphosate, and all the fruit and veg now is ridiculous. Actually, an apple here and in America, if you get it in the supermarket, can be over a year since it was picked. They put it in cold storage and all this. It's not fresh. It's not good. Whereas my ribeye, it's just up the road. It's fresh, not many air miles. It does everything. It's good for the planet. It's good for the soil. It's good for the environment, as opposed to being a vegan, which you get food from all over the world. They're all driven around and, all delivered by planes. And it's just makes sense in every single aspect of my life, really.
And then you have 25 times more sentient or emotion-feeling animals brutally murdered in order to raise your soy and corn and the stuff that most, plant-based diets are very heavy on. Any kind of plant-based food really is going to necessitate the killing of far more sentient animals than one cow that can feed a human for at least 6 months, if not a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I grew fruit and veg when I was high carb. I felt I'm going to be as natural as possible. I'm going to get away from the supermarkets, get away from monocrops and plastics and pesticides. And within 6 months, my little veg patch was covered in plastics and I was using pesticides and traps, and that's not being facetious. That's exactly what happened, because every single animal, and rightly so, it's their environment, bugs, butterflies, mice, badgers, everything, microbes, all the living things that live off the land, I had to kill. I mean, That it really was that simple. Horrible. But
Yeah.
that's the reality, and
Yeah.
netting around it, and
Yeah.
oh boy,
You want to eat
just
something, other something else has to die as it stands right now.
yes.
You know, it's unfortunate. So I want to circle back to the athlete's foot. I've been seeing that in my practice a lot. But before that, I want to ask you a little bit about your schedule these days. So what are you spending the most chunk of your time dedicated to?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit like you. I'm creating content, obviously, trying to get the word out there. And I would say that's mainly it. Learning. I've got 2 degrees. I've got 2 honors degrees, one in English and now one in physiology and health sciences. So I'm always constantly trying to learn. I like to keep up to date with all the studies. I am thinking about trying to do a podcast which is more science based, actually going through the studies and meticulously going through it. I know Bart Kay does a bit of that, but I think that's something that people would be really interested in, just slowly going through each section and dissecting it. So that's something I'm looking at, and also writing a book. I think a lot of people have done that. I did a low carb book many years ago, which I've taken off Amazon, which was quite successful. But my own personal regime, I train, I do a bit of exercise. I follow everything that I say. I don't use any pharmaceuticals. I'm not on any medications. I use tallow soap. That's the only thing. We use 3 local farms for all of our food, really. Don't use the supermarkets if we can help it. Keep away from all that type of thing. That's it, really.
Creating content, and are you working with coaching clients in person
Oh
or
yes, yeah,
online?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So I do all my stuff online, apart from the rehab, obviously,
Mhm.
because you need to be hands on with that. Yeah, so I get a fair few coaching clients, a lot from recommendation. I tend to try and get the people to be, take the training wheels off and be able to do it themselves. So I don't tend to do sort of lots and lots of sessions. There are a couple of people that have been around for a couple of years that just like that weekly accountability, just talking about different things and their conditions, how they're improving, which is fine. But I like people to get intuitive. I don't believe in weighing food out. I think you should eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. But some people do need some hand holding. And I think when I get a new client, a lot of them are interested because of my obesity diabetes specialism, and also because I've got the qualified phlebotomy side of things. I can tell them it's not medical advice, but I can say, this is what this means. The reason they've tested that is it indicates that, like CRP, C-reactive protein, I can say that's an inflammatory marker. That's why they've tested it. Yours is 0.5, so that's pretty good. Or it's 299, well, that's pretty bad. So which happened the other day. And then
Wow.
oh yeah, that's quite interesting. We got that down to 30 within about
Whoa. I
6
don't think I've
days.
ever heard of 299 before.
Yeah, it's the worst one I've ever seen. I've had 80 go down to like 30 within a week, but that was the highest one. But they had a serious issue, actually, which which I said you need to go and get that checked out, and they did need an appendix operation the next day. So
There you go.
it just shows that the bloods can be good. But just on that subject, it's not the be all and end all. It's only a number. You need a clinical presentation of symptoms. So if you've got a CRP of 299 and you're also having excruciating pain in the lower left quadrant or lower right quadrant in that particular case, I said, that's an appendix. You need to go and see your medical care professional. That's serious. And then I got an email saying, yeah, I'm in hospital.
Wow.
I got gangrenous appendix. So that's sort of like the benefit of coaching. You can get someone to instantly go and do something. So I think that's the interesting part, but more often than not, it's pretty straightforward. People just want to know what to eat, what to avoid. They ask the questions like, well, why are seed oil so bad? But they don't say it like that. They say, why is sunflower oil so bad? Because you've got this beautiful bottle with a wonderful picture of a sunflower. Doesn't that look healthy? This wonderful vegetable oil. So it's very difficult for that person to see that as unhealthy, especially as they've been told for years. So then you just talk to them about seed oils and how they're manufactured, you know, the chemicals that are used, the high temperatures and all this.
The deodorizers, that's the fun
yeah,
part.
deodorizers, yeah, anything to stop it from being rancid. And they look at you as like, oh, wow. And I use a silly analogy. I say, like, if you get an olive, you can squash it. You can make olive oil, right? Just squash it. That's it. If you get a sunflower seed, you tell me how you can get on getting some oil out of that seed.
Yeah.
Because you need huge amounts of chemicals, heat and pressure, and it's just not natural. It's just not natural.
I make my students watch, there's a really disgusting video. It's like a 2-minute video on YouTube. If you just Google, how is canola oil made? And I make all my students watch it. It's like, I have a list of non-negotiable content that they absolutely have to watch, and this is one of them. So it's hilarious that after they watch, it's like, oh my gosh.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So let us circle back. Oh, actually, since we're talking about what you're doing now with the content creation. So right now you've got Instagram. Do you have a YouTube channel right now that you're also keeping?
Yeah, the YouTube channel. You'll see as Coach Stephen or the UK Carnivore, or even Stephen Thomas BSc honors, you know, as what that is. The UK Carnivore at Instagram. On Instagram, I think I've got about 13,800 followers. So I'm not a big influencer, but you know, it's good numbers.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think the YouTube, what I like is it is growing, you know, and the people that do follow me, that, you know, I get a good ratio of subscribers to watch time and a lot of engagement with polls and questions and comments. So quite enjoying building on the YouTube channel, actually. And the podcast has taken off. I do an audio podcast, which is one of the top rated ones on Spotify and Apple. I don't know how that happened. I only started it in January, so pleased with that.
Love that. I love it. Okay.
Oh, and an app. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. And I also bought out an app. So that's also on Google and Apple.
Tell us a little bit more about.
Sorry?
You said you bought an app?
No, I've designed an app, made an app.
Oh, okay.
Carnivore experience app.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the things I noticed is if you like use the big horrible companies like Amazon, they've always got a good app. And I just thought, well, there's nothing like that really in the carnivore space. So I designed one, and that's been out. It's still on trial. I've had about 800 people sign up for it to sort of product test it. And the idea is it's very simple, you know, step by step. Step one is, you know, is it safe with the normal questions? So that's linked to lots of doctors answering questions about that. And then how do I do it? So that's like 19 top tips to start. And then there's how often should I eat? So every little section that most people ask, and there's videos. And then I have like a 30-day kickstart where every single day there's something to watch, which talks about motivation, your reason why, you know, the why that makes you cry. Because I think that's one of the things that's missing in a lot of what we talk about. People talk about the nuance. So, you know, they'll talk about the studies, they'll talk about why veganism is bad, for instance. I don't really get into that much. But the practicalities of motivation and how you feel, the problem with addiction and cravings, I think is under talked about. So I have things to talk about: motivation, goal setting, commitment, make a commitment to yourself, an online commitment builder. So you basically punch in some things and then you get an email, which is your signed commitment to this way of eating. And I think that is, you know, one of the things I use with a lot of coaching clients is about the subconscious mind. If you say, I'm not going to eat chocolate, that's a negative way of thinking, which is not helpful, because if you say, don't think about pink elephants, you have to think about pink elephants to not think about them. So I just say simple things like start the day saying, today I'm going to eat protein and fats. That's it. And be on that positive wavelength of not feeling you're restricting yourself, but actually you're opening yourself up to sort of, you know, this glorious, wonderful cacophony of different foods that you can eat. and enjoy guilt-free, because it's all tasty. It's all fabulous food. And if you don't like ribeye now, when you start out, you might like fish, you might like duck, you know. So I say that's what you want to do. Eat the foods you really enjoy. Just go for it. Forget about all the brainwashing. Forget about how fat is bad or saturated fat is bad for you, and just see a reversal of your fortunes. And once you start thinking positively, it's just sort of like a virtuous circle. You start to think positive, you eat those foods, you feel better, you think, well, you know, I'm going to do this tomorrow, this is great. And it just gets better and better. And you know, my last success story, I've done this year, I've done 77 success story videos, and yesterday I did a little catch up with somebody. They lost 24 pounds. They're off their blood pressure medications. They were due to have a knee operation, but the pain's gone so much they've actually cancelled the knee operation. That's just a guy, you know, that's a guy called Dan, you know, just an average person who's taken to this way of eating. And I every single day get a message, at least once a day I get somebody saying, and you do, I mean, this is not being big-headed, this is what happens in this space, which never happened when I was a high carb personal trainer, by the way. Everything was hard, you know, losing 7 pounds was like, woohoo, haven't we done well? Well, now I'll get somebody saying I've lost 7 pounds this month and it's not enough, you know. And it's really fantastic, this way of eating. And the only disheartening thing is when somebody, I've used this before, Sarah, but this is really, you know, this does happen. I'll get a client that will say, I've just been to my doctor. And this, like a true story, I've lost 60 pounds in 6 months. I'm off my blood pressure meds. I'm off my metformin. I feel great. My skin's cleared up. I've got more energy. He asked me what I've done. I said, I'm doing carnivore. And he said, that's going to kill you. You know, and that's very disheartening. Because firstly, that's BS. I mean, but the experience of their own eyes is trumped by somebody in a white coat with a stethoscope, because they know best.
Yeah.
But obviously they don't, because that to me sounded like someone that's going the right way and getting fitter.
Yeah, I answer a lot of those questions in my group coaching and my one-on-one coaching. It's a lot of even if you're fully logically up here on board and it's working and you're losing weight, over time you'll still have those questions. It's like, is it really, you know, right, of like what I'm doing? And especially when you start also sometimes having little things here and there, like the keto rash, you know, or a lot of things that commonly happen, or you get constipated a little bit, you know. I mean, all those things are transient things, and in a lot of cases there are certain very easy solutions, like, you know, maybe it's the dairy, it's, you know, anything that activates your opioid receptor is going to lead to constipation. I mean, there's so many things, little nuances here and there. I hate the word nuances, but I have to say it here. It's usually when people are BSing, you know, usually it's politicians and they'll just say that word a lot. It's like, be quiet. Anyway, so this is when people start double guessing. And so what I've done, I've created a YouTube playlist called Client Nutrition Education Playlist. And all my clients, the one-on-one and the group coaching clients, they get that. But especially my one-on-one, like we set goals that they have to listen to it, because what I add to it are basic nutritional education. Because when you are armored, can I say that? When you're armed, no, armed. When you are armed with knowledge, then when you get through some tough times like a keto rash and it's messing with your head, then your education is going to give you the strength to stick to it and not use that as an excuse to go back to the sugar addiction and the food addiction, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. It's a lot of people talk to me and they have more knowledge than the person they're talking to is supposed to be a specialist, especially when it comes to diabetes, because obviously my qualifications mean that people with diabetes come to me a lot, type 1 and type 2, and they resolve it. They use their blood glucose monitor and they use their keto mojo and they see what's going on and they see what foods are bad for them and what are good, and they realize all the stuff they've been told is complete rubbish. I mean, that is it. Sadly, that's really quite sad, I think. Some diabetics were told, you've got to eat first thing in the morning because your blood sugar will be really low because you're diabetic. Well, I've never encountered that ever. All diabetics are worried about it being high. That's the first thing. Never about it being low. So they don't really need to eat that. That's complete rubbish. And I think, there was a big fight to try and stop patients getting continual glucose monitors. And also when it started out, I can remember there was a big fight to try and stop patients having their own glucose monitors. They just wanted to keep that. Oh yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, when you look at the studies, when you look at, for instance, the public relations catchphrase, which is pre-diabetes, in 2001, the PR chief of the American Diabetes Association, Richard Carn, this is all matter of record. He regrets this now, by the way. He was invited to a lunch at the National Institute of Health. They met in the cafeteria and they brainstormed, and they wanted to fix the way to talk to people about glucose intolerance and all the nuances. And they came up with this PR phrase, which was pre-diabetes. That was it. It's a PR phrase. And with the stroke of a pen, with this PR campaign, 74 million Americans suddenly became pre-diabetic because they had this new category. I can assure you from literally thousands of bloods, everybody that I've ever met that's pre-diabetic, that's gone low carb, has never ended up diabetic. Not one. And that's also, I think, what he found. I think it was in 2009. I'm speaking off the top of my head here, but I think he then regretted it, looking back, that they came up with this phrase. But they used it. So that was it. It was to scare patients into action. But it's wrong because, I use the phrase pre-diabetic, people understand it, but there's really just, it's actually glucose toxicity, that you're eating too much glucose and your body can't cope with it. So right. I think it's pretty interesting that you can arm people with all this information, but they still have this little bit of doubt, even with, their own blood glucose. So they'll, the HbA1c, if your red blood cells last longer than the normal person, your HbA1c can be artificially high. So you should be looking at your blood glucose, your continual glucose monitor, your fasted insulin. They are actually better markers than the HbA1c, which is a calculated number. So, and I'll have this because if you have someone that's hemolytic, so their red blood cells last not as long as they should, so the red blood cells are dying early, you have a misleading HbA1c, which is too low, you see. So if you have that situation, you're told to ignore that because you've got to look at their daily blood glucose, their continual glucose monitor, their C-peptide, all those sort of things, which makes total sense because it's your actual blood and it's the glucose in it at that moment, for real. So if you have red blood cells that are lasting longer, you're going to have an artificially high HbA1c because it's a calculation. It's based on an average life of a red blood cell. So if you're supposed to ignore it because the red blood cells die too soon, you should ignore it when your red blood cells are lasting longer, which happens in carnivore. And there are tests to even prove how long the red blood cells have been around. And the best thing to do is to look at your blood glucose, to look at your C-peptide if you have blood tests, your fasted insulin, your fasted glucose. And that is the best measure of how you're managing your blood glucose. But that's a no-brainer, isn't it? But people have that argument. They'll go in and they'll say, my continual glucose monitor is showing you that I'm averaging sort of 80 all day, every day, but my HbA1c's gone up. Oh, well, that means then, you're doing the wrong thing. And it's not true, simply not true.
Why would you think that they wanted to scare people with the prediabetes? Like what's the return on that, or what is the effect that's going to have on people and business and industry?
Well, the thing was that they believed that the glucose tolerance test and all the tests they were doing were not making people sit up and take notice. So you could say, I'm very skeptical of this, that they're doing it for the good of the patient. But anything that the pharmaceutical industry or PR people come up with within that remit, I think has disastrous consequences personally. I just think it gets people into possibly taking a low sort of dosage pharmaceutical.
Right. Like
And
metformin or something to
yeah,
sensitize the cells.
just
Yeah.
something to get them looking at it.
Kind of like with blood pressure, right? They kept changing the ranges of blood
Yes.
pressure. So now, and like even with statins, you know, they kept changing the ranges of the target cholesterol. So now all of a sudden, overnight, you have a brand new market, you know, and we're
Mm.
talking billions of dollars.
And
So
that makes no sense, because the 120/80, which is more led by the insurance industry for premiums, so over that you can put the premiums up, that's based on, you know, a male who's athletic at age 20. Your arteries, however good your diet is, will stiffen over time. And in the 1950s and before, if you get sort of medical textbooks, which luckily I've got, the blood pressure guidelines are age related. So as you get older, as you would expect, as your arteries stiffen, which is a natural process in aging, however you eat, you're going to expect the blood pressure to go up. That makes total sense. And also, as you look at the individual person, there shouldn't be this one size fits all. If you look at the blood pressure of a giraffe with a long neck compared to one with a short neck, they will have different blood pressure, because there's an element of having to push blood up against gravity. So why should a 6'7" person who works out have the same blood pressure as a 4'11" person who sits in an office all day? It's just absolutely ludicrous.
yeah.
So it should be based on your age. It should be based on your body composition, your activity levels, and also your presentation symptoms and other things. So if your blood pressure is running allegedly high and it's 130/90, you see the pulse pressure there, the difference between the top and bottom number is 40. That indicates to me someone that's pretty fit, actually, compared to someone, say, that's, I don't know, 120/60. Pulse pressure is a difference of 60. That would be more problematic, in my opinion, than someone with the 40. But I mean, I don't get into medical advice, but from my physiology training, that's something that you would say you maybe need to go and speak to a medical professional about that, because that's a big difference.
Yeah. I'm just trying to calculate mine in my head. I run very low. My blood pressure has always been like, I mean, I've had it like at 118, sometimes 110, 109, the systolic, and the diastolic can be literally like 70s, you know, even lower. It's crazy. It's always been like that though.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget that's just a rule of thumb, but it's something to look at, isn't it? Because you're looking at your returning blood. I mean, it's just an average. If you have no problems, if you're not fatigued, no chest pains, no dizziness, no dizziness from sitting to standing, then it's how you run. And that's the other thing, I think, you know, with the phlebotomy side, some people, they cycle with less white blood cells, for instance. But they're fine. I had a nurse that told me, I've done that for 30 years. I've cycled with white blood cells that are very low. And you think, well, have you had a problem? Do you get lots of infections? You're in an industry where you're exposed to tons of infections. She's like, I've never missed a day's work in my life. It's like, well, I would say it's probably not a problem after 30 years of this, and you being involved with patients on a daily basis, and you've never had a day off sick. I don't think you got a problem, you know. So I think that's the main thing for me, is what the person is like and how they're presenting, really.
Yeah, that's also how I look at it. You know, me and my hubby, we both literally haven't been sick in over a decade. You know, it's crazy. You know, and for me it like coincided because he was doing more carnivore, but with a little bit of spinach until we figured out the spinach was giving him low back pain. But you know, he was doing it even before I met him. And so when I met him is when I started changing my diet. And that's before I read the science behind it. You know, it was just about eating more protein. And that right around that time, like literally stopped getting sick. And I used to get sick all the time, even when I came to Miami, the first few years, and I would get the flu literally. I remember there was the semester where I was taking all my stat courses because I hated the stats. So I left them for one semester, big mistake. It was this very stressful time. And I was sick for 10 days, like sickness like I've never had before. 10 days out of the month. And then the next month again, 10 days out of the month, another sickness. And then the last month of the semester, another 10 days, I was out, like, you know, in bed trying to study and catch up. And, you know, after that is when I started changing my diet for a longer period of time, doing, you know, no carbs. I did keto first. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I don't get the cold, the regular cold that everybody gets every few months, like at all, you know?
Yeah,
And
I think,
neither,
yeah.
yeah.
I think I used to, I mean, before I did this, before low carb, I would be niggly and at the doctors every 3 months with some antibiotics for this, that, and the other. And I haven't had a day sick for 9 years. And it's just,
Wow.
it coincides with low carb. I mean, that's the thing. And, you know, I must say about this actually, because I interviewed someone who had Crohn's and he was quite upset that he was told it was chronic progressive, very, very much like type 2 diabetes. And that's all completely gone with this way of eating. And
Wow.
he went on Facebook and said, you know, I've cured it. And there was a few people saying, well, you haven't cured it. You've just reversed it. So I've been a sad person, looked up in the dictionary what cured meant, and he has cured it because it's getting a person healthy. That's what that is.
Absence of
And I had to
symptoms.
use
That's
a
a
really
cure,
silly, that's a cure, yeah. And I had to use a silly analogy and say, look, if I had like suddenly had this strange bruise on my arm appearing and it kept appearing, and then you found out I was hitting myself with a hammer on my arm and I stopped doing that, right? I haven't got a disease of bruised arm. I've stopped hitting myself with a hammer, right? So it's not a cure. So if you're eating something that's giving you Crohn's symptoms and you stop eating it, you've cured yourself, but all you've done is remove the hammer. That's what you've done. And of course, if I went back to hitting myself on a hammer, that illness would come back. Doesn't mean anything other than you have taken away that insult to your body. And I think that the way even people in the carnivore space, we still use the stuff that the mainstream are stuffing down our necks. I think it's Dr. Ali Nadir, I think. He was talking about cholesterol levels. They say high cholesterol levels. No, that's normal. You know, when you go carnivore, it's normal. What we used to have was abnormal, you know, low, problematic, mainly because of plant sterols keeping it low. Once it goes up, it's not high, it's where it should be. So as soon as you start to open your eyes and think, oh yeah, I've been told you can't cure diabetes, but I seem to get off my meds and get rid of all my symptoms. You have to say reversed, you can't say cured. Well, no, actually you cured it because you found the thing that's insulting you. Crohn's, you can't cure it. Well, you can, because if you take the food out that's causing the problem, it goes. It's really, really simple. I haven't got high cholesterol. I've got cholesterol I should have, and it was abnormally low because I was eating too many plant sterols. You know, I think that's the thing that's happening. I think people are beginning to look at how we talk about things. Even your blood pressure one, is it high blood pressure or is it blood pressure that's appropriate for someone who's 60? I mean, that's a different way of talking, and a much better way, because it's got nuance. You know, it's
oh no. No,
I did that
it
deliberately,
hurts.
by the way. I did it deliberately. You know, it's an appropriate thing, because you're looking at the person and saying, yeah, of course they've got blood pressure, they're that age, you know.
You know, the thing with traditional academic institutions, something I've noticed, because I spent so much time, decades really, pursuing traditional academia, and fear is a very common vibe. Everybody wants to be in line. Nobody dares to question. And it trickles into the way that you think, the way that you formulate your hypotheses, the way you interact with other people. Like, oh my gosh, it's not a cure. No, you can't say cure, where everybody's so scared, you know? And the pharmaceutical companies love that, because then they can keep you and the people that you're recommending or talking to, the patients, they can keep you in that state of fear, which means that that gives them power. And I think that it's like the whole system, you know, it takes a very special kind of person, I think, to stay in that system, which I obviously could never do, which is why I was like left.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I found that even, say, for instance, with rehab, you're talking about lower back pain. Someone says I've got piriformis syndrome. I say that just means pear-shaped. I mean, it's just a pear-shaped muscle, right? It's, you know, and I think that's the other thing, when you break the words down for people and explain, it takes all the mystique out, you know, and you
Yeah.
just say, there you go. So atherosclerotic is arteries hardening. That's it. That's all it is. You know, it's not a flash thing. It's just a
Yeah.
Latin or Greek derivative, and it all makes sense.
Yeah. And you have to take control of your health, and to do so, you have to educate yourself. And if that means listening to thousands of hours of content on that topic, then that's what it means, and that's what you should be doing, you know? I think we are in a time and age where we have access to information and we should take advantage of it. There's just no more excuse. If you have an issue that has not been resolved, they usually don't get resolved, you know, with traditional mainstream medicine. Unfortunately, it's, you know, it's great to go to a traditionally trained doctor for accidents, things like that. They can save your life, you know, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, the vast majority of conditions they are dealing with are lifestyle related, and they are poorly equipped to deal with any lifestyle related issue. They don't even teach them nutrition, and if they do, they give them the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, or, you know, like the worst kind of information. So yeah, you gotta take you gotta take control, and I think scientific literacy is critical. I think in this day and age, if you don't have a moderate, I'm not going to say high and I'm not going to say low, at least moderate amount of scientific literacy, it's almost as if you're illiterate in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was saying when you said, what am I looking at doing? It's things like taking a study and going through it and giving people some terms. And Dr. Paul Mason did a brilliant one about statins, where he did a graph that showed the difference between the medication and not taking the medication, and the way it was presented in the study, and how you would do it as a person based on not trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, very different. I mean, this thing, what you're saying about the mainstream as well, they're not even interested. That's the thing. I had a very interesting client, Kevin Smith, who resolved his multiple sclerosis, and he had MRIs, and the consultant actually, he was telling me, the consultant came in and said, this isn't supposed to happen, and threw the folder down on the table and said, I don't know how these lesions are going.
Should be happy.
And you know, and I asked him in the interview, I said, so was he interested in what you were doing? Because you see, now if I was a consultant, I'd go, wow, someone is curing or reversing, you know, this condition. What are you doing? But they didn't want to know. He said, oh, I'm doing carnivore. It's like, oh, well, you know, get on with that then. It seems to be working. And that's terrible. But
Wow.
but that is quite commonplace.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I know there's a lot of, you know, Dr. Google, and doctors have had 9 years training and stuff like that. But if you've been training, and you've been training with the premise starting from the wrong place, and I will relate this, I'll take out the doctor side of things and look at personal training. I realized that all my training to become a personal trainer was rubbish, absolute rubbish. You know, the nutrition was rubbish, the frequency, everything, calorie counting, energy in, energy out, all that rubbish. But I had to play the game. Now, what happened to me was I realized it didn't work for me, and also realized it didn't work for people I was training. So then I went down the low carb route, because I opened my eyes to the science, and so did my clients. And it was clients coming to me as well. I mean, there were people on the diabetic side coming in, and I'm like, wow, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm doing low carb. And woohoo, yeah, it's worked for you, isn't it? It's great. So I think you've got to be open-minded, and some people just don't want to be. They just don't want to believe that they've spent 9 years studying in a certain way, and some of it is bunk, you know. And but it is. Yeah, well, most of it. I was trying to be magnanimous, but I would say in my personal training, the particular tutor was fantastic, and you know, exercises are exercises, you know, squatting, I understand, and bicep curls and all that. But actually the bit behind it, the science behind it, you know, rest times, the best way to train, even things like the level of testosterone in your body, you know, even that's been proven to not really correlate with, you know, muscle protein synthesis. It's more to do with androgen receptors, density and sensitivity. It's not the level of testosterone when it comes to training. That was Stu Phillips, I think, 2018. So there's lots of things I learned that I know were rubbish from real world experience, but I was open to it. I could have been closed-minded like I was when I was 20, just going back, circling to the beginning of the interview. So a nice segue for you to close it down if you want. But I can remember, like I say, going through that magazine, they're eating high fat. That's never going to work.
Right.
You know, now if someone comes to me and they've got some new idea, I never say that's rubbish. I say, right, well, what's the proof? Why are you saying this? Show me some examples. And being open-minded, because I think that's the best way to learn. You know, and conversations shut down, you know, in much bigger ways about bigger subjects, which I won't go into, obviously. But, you know, debate is the thing. If you've got a theory, it should be strong enough to stand up to debate.
Yeah.
It should not be, if someone's got an opposing view, let's just shut them down. Let's just, no, I don't want to hear that. That's rubbish. Don't let anyone else hear that.
So many implications to what it means to, because then if they start believing it and they start pursuing it, then how are they going to go back and operate and work with their, you know, patients that they're supposed to be seeing on a regular basis? And it's like it influences their career, their finances. They would feel like a hypocrite. They would have to change careers, which means finances are going to take a hit. They might have student loans. I know here in the United States, we have a lot of student loans. Like, it has a lot of implications. So it's just so much easier to just like not put too much stock in it and just move on with next patient, you know? Until they get sick and they realize that now it's their turn. So let me, before we wrap it up, I mentioned that I really wanted to ask you about the athlete foot. Can you share a little bit more about that and how it completely went away? Like, what did you do before versus after, and how it went away?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you focused on that, because I actually got to the point where I tried everything and I thought, I've got this for the rest of my life. So when I was high carb, in and out of gyms, so all the things they tell you, I had all the things that will mean that I'll always have athlete's foot. So I was in and out of gyms, using showers, getting sweaty, having, you know, hot feet because I was working out. And so I tried everything. I tried sort of duct tape and all the acids and powdering my socks and powdering my trainers. And even if I went barefoot and wore flip-flops or barefoot completely on the beach and everything like that for a long period of time, it still stuck around, stuck around. So, you know, going into the sea, salty water, urinating on it. I tried every sort of thing that people said might get rid of it. Nothing worked. So I actually, in my head, didn't even think about it, which is also how I know it isn't like a placebo effect, because I just forgot about it, literally forgot about it. So then when I went low carb, things started to improve. And like the big you know, red mark here actually was so prominent. I was really pleased that had gone, and the weight went, and the lower left quadrant pain went, and, you know, the belly fat went, and everything went. And I just thought, well, that's great. And then when I started doing these sort of things, these type of interviews, and people said, what else has gone? Just one day I said, oh, well, athlete's feet. I haven't got that. I haven't got athlete's foot anymore, just as a thing. Well, the only thing I'd changed, because I still work out and I still do all the things, you know, like sweating and go to the gym and showering and, you know, wearing socks and trainers, and everything else was the same. The only thing that was different was the food. So I can't say it was the change in diet, because, you know, it's just possibly a coincidence, because it's a correlation. It could be some other thing, but it's very unlikely that it is anything other than the way I eat. And I have done an interventional N=1 experiment, and I've reintroduced carbs, and it's come back. I've taken them out and it's gone.
So now you can say it. That's your RCT right there.
Yeah,
it's a little underpowered, but we'll take it.
Yes, it's not a really good, powerful sample size, but my N equals 1, that's what happened. So, but again, it's an example of one of those things where I was told to do all the things. I followed everything. I followed absolutely every mainstream piece of advice. And then I even went off piste and did lots of sort of herbal things and everything. I tried everything, honestly.
Wow.
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
You know, potatoes and rubbing a potato on it, cutting it in half, rubbing a potato on it, burying the other half, all of it, every single thing, even the woo-woo stuff. I tried it all.
Wow.
So I had 35 years of that, of trying different things.
And I ask because I have a client that, you know, everything else is doing great, but we still have that. And I was wondering, like, yeah, do you know how long it took you before it went away?
Well, I'm thinking possibly like 5 years, because I can remember not saying it when I went low carb and not saying it much when I was keto.
It took a
But
long
by
time.
the end of keto, it started to go. And I think when I started at MeatRx, when I first became a carnivore coach, which was 4 years ago, I definitely mentioned it then. So I think it was about 4 to 5 years. I am slightly more barefoot than I used to be, but it's marginal. It is really marginal. Yeah. So
Gotcha. Okay.
it's a long time.
It's good
A
to
long
know, but
time.
yeah, it might take a little extra time than just a few months, you know, not everything happens overnight.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, what you're actually told to do, like really, really dry between your toes and use talcum powder and all that sort of stuff, or even use a hair dryer to dry between your toes. If I shower and I'm in a rush, I don't do any of that. I
Right.
don't do any of that. And I stopped doing that 8 years ago. I mean, you know, just because it hadn't worked. So all of that stuff actually I thought was possibly counterproductive, because, you know, I just shower now, I'm in and out 10 minutes and don't pay any particular attention to in between my toes, and it's gone.
So happy to
Completely
hear that.
gone.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Coach Stephen. Where can people find you so they can work with you?
Well, the website, the ukcarnivore.com, is possibly the easiest. I also have the Instagram, which is the UK Carnivore, that you'll find me on there. I think that's it. That's all you need to do. I'm on YouTube as well, and like I say, I've got an app. So
Yeah. Maybe if you can send me the link to the app, I'll also post it in the description box. That way people can check it out as well.
okay.
I love the idea. And Carnivore Thon on July 9th.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, everybody. It's free. And I'm going to be on at 11 a.m. Eastern. Just wanted to remind
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, and it is going to be free. And one of the things that I've got to talk to StreamYard about is how to then put it online, because I'll probably have to chop it up into like hour chunks for people to watch. But there won't be a charge for any of it ever at any point. In the description on YouTube, every single speaker will have a link to at least one of their social media sites. So your name's in there in the running order. You know, there'll be a link to you. I'm going to try and do graphics on the screen as well. So when you're on, your details will come up. It's quite a bit of work. I mean, I haven't got a tech guy. It's me doing it all. So it's been a bit difficult, you know, getting all the people together. It's going to be worth it. I think it's going to be a great event. And also there's a link for people, which I'll send you, Sarah, where you can pick the expert you want to ask a question to, and you submit a question. So we've already got quite a few responses. So on that link, it just takes you straight to what's your name, what's your question, who do you want to give the question to. So it hopefully is going to be very user friendly, and it will touch on keto, low carb. It's not going to be, if you're carnivore, that's the only person we want to speak to, because there is people, it's a ketogenic diet, isn't it? I mean, you're in a state of ketosis.
Nuances.
So yeah. Yeah, it's going to be the most nuanced 24 hours you'll ever see.
Oh my God. Send me the link. I'll post it also in the description box so people can submit their questions. I think that's very helpful.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for having me on it. I'm very excited to be there. And thank you again, Coach, for coming over. Hopefully this should be out in a couple of days. So it's definitely way before the Carnivore-thon airs. And yeah, thank you everybody for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.